Well, kia ora tātou. Tuatahi, first I just want to acknowledge that this has been an extraordinary morning for many New Zealanders up and down the country. From 2:30 this morning, essentially, some people have been up worried about their homes, their families. I've had throughout the course of this morning, I've been briefed by my colleagues here. I have Roger Ball, who is the National Director from the National Emergency Management Agency, and GNS science expert Bill Fry here with me as well, who will be able to elaborate on some of the causes for what's happened this morning, as well as the way that the approach to this event has been managed. But first I do want to acknowledge the people of Te Tairāwhiti, the East Coast, those up in Pewhairangi in the Bay of Islands, those that have had to pick up their homes, pivot and evacuate, and have done so exceptionally well. The messaging was, when it is long or strong, get gone. This morning, whether that was at 2:30 or whether that was later on throughout the course of the morning, we saw New Zealanders literally adhere to that advice. They felt the long or strong earthquakes, and they knew to grab their bag and head into the highlands. I can only but thank and acknowledge the tireless efforts of the men and women from up and down the coast who knew how to act, when to act, and what to do. This morning I have had the opportunity to come from the National Crisis Management Centre here in the bunker. I've been briefed by the national team as to the operations as they are unfolding across the country. What I will say is that this has been a dynamic event that is constantly evolving. Information has been provided on the basis sometimes of having to strike a balance, wanting to provide certainty to communities, but also trying to balance that with accuracy about how much information can be given. And I acknowledge my colleagues from both NEMA and GNS for being able to provide that balance throughout the course of this morning. As you'll know, the area that has had to be evacuated has been extended, and it now covers the area from the west coast of the North Island, from Cape Reinga to Ahipara, the east coast of the North Island from Cape Reinga to Whangarei, from Matata to Tolaga Bay, including Whakatane and Opotiki, and Great Barrier Island. Our civil defence emergency management groups in those affected regions have been activated and leading the response on the ground. I've just spoken literally with the team right now from Opotiki, who advised me that essentially all of that town has now been evacuated with the assistance from many stakeholders, including volunteers, the civil defence, as well as police. They have many of these centres have set themselves up and down the country in those areas that are most impacted and are providing regional responses. People have done, as I said at the outset, the right thing in the regions by picking up, packing up, and by and large staying calm. I want to acknowledge the anxiety for many families and for many people as those messages were coming through this morning. I want to acknowledge that so many people have done exceptionally well to follow the civil defence management messaging. And I want to thank the men, the women and children who have had their lives jolted this morning. Now, as we pivot towards the current environment that we're in, we're asking those that have moved to high ground or inland to remain where you are until the official all clear is given. The official all clear will be given when we have the advice that it is right to do so. We know that people may get a little, perhaps, tired or bored sitting at home or whatever it may be. But we are asking, please do not go and leave those areas until you have the all clear. I'm going to hand over to my colleagues from the National Emergency Management Agency and GNS to provide some further context, and then we'll be happy to take a couple of questions.
Thank you, Minister. Morena tātou. As I'm sure you are aware, the National Emergency Management Agency issued a tsunami warning this morning following a magnitude 8.1 earthquake northeast of New Zealand near the Kermadec Islands around 9 a.m. The areas under land and marine threat, as the Minister has specified, are the following: the west coast of the North Island from Cape Reinga to Ahipara, the east coast of the North Island from Cape Reinga to Whangarei, from Matata to Tolaga Bay, including Whakatane and Opotiki and Great Barrier Island. Strong and unusual currents and unpredictable surges near the shore may be expected in other parts of New Zealand. This could affect beach, harbour, estuary and small boat activities, so we're advising to play it safe in those areas. People do need to stay off the beach and out of the water. The full list of those areas is relatively extensive. It is on our website on civildefence.govt.nz. The severity of currents and surges will vary over the period this morning that the warning is in effect for. We are advising people to stay out of the water, as I say, including the sea, rivers and estuaries, so that includes not going out in boats. We ask that people do not go sightseeing. This is important. The first wave may not be the largest. Tsunami activity will continue for several hours and the threat must be regarded as real until this warning is cancelled. Evacuation advice overrides the current COVID-19 alert level requirements. Listen to local civil defence authorities and follow any instructions regarding evacuation of your area. If you are told to evacuate, do not stay at home. Stay 2 metres away from other people if you are able to safely do so while you evacuate. Do not return until an official all-clear message is given by Civil Defence. The National Crisis Management Centre has been activated, as the Minister has said, in the Beehive in Wellington. All Civil Defence emergency management groups are active and closely monitoring the situation across the regions in support of their communities. Tsunami sirens in some areas have been used to advise of the warning. Regarding the emergency mobile alert, a series of EMAs, emergency mobile alerts, were issued to areas under land threat this morning, asking people to evacuate out of all tsunami zones to high ground or inland. The first alert was sent to the initial areas under the land threat on the east coast of the North Island. The warning was then extended to include the top of the west coast of the North Island. Only those in areas under land threat were sent the emergency mobile alert message. Thank you. That concludes my update. Minister.
We're happy to take any questions.
Minister, can you let us know if there was any warning that these quakes would be coming?
Look, the advice that we received is that the information came in from this morning, but I might turn to Bill Fry, who is from GNS, who's been monitoring the indices for us.
No, there's no way we can predict when the earthquakes happen. So the first of this morning came without any significant warning. Then after that, when we see a big earthquake like this, we know that we're more likely to see another earthquake after that. So we're particularly vigilant after the first earthquake, looking for the follow-on earthquakes.
Can you explain how the three are connected and why they're doing it? And also maybe a comment on how unusual it is to see earthquakes of this size.
Yeah. So I can comment on how the first and the last are related, because we have a pretty good feel for the physics and the science around that. The second middle earthquake, it's a bit more tenuous, so it happened quite far away, I think 1,000 kilometers away from the first earthquake. When we have a big earthquake like the first one at 2 o'clock this morning, we know in the region that's very proximal to that earthquake, the nearby region, we know it's highly likely to have another earthquake. Usually that's not bigger than the first, which is what we've seen today, but it does happen. It's not unexpected. And then when you get farther and farther away, you have to invoke other mechanisms that are a little less certain, certainly in the early hours of a response.
How long have you been doing this, and how unusual is this in your experience?
I've been in New Zealand for 13 years responding to large earthquakes and tsunamis. This is the first time we've had this particular sequence, but every sequence we get, it's usually complicated and we usually learn from it, and that's what I expect we'll do today.
Could you please clarify what the message is for Aucklanders who are near beaches?
Yeah. Look, so the messaging is, all of the messaging is available on the Civil Defence website. There has not been any notification that they need to evacuate, only in those areas where they have been required to do so.
That's correct. Auckland is not within the regions that are being asked to evacuate. Auckland does have a beach and marine threat, as the Minister says, and they need to stay off the beach and out of the water.
Did the warning systems work overnight? There didn't seem to be tsunami sirens or that kind of thing?
Yeah, look, so the information that we've received this morning is that the system has held up, but as you'll be aware, with any event we always undertake reviews, and we're constantly reviewing throughout the course as we're going as well. The warning system that went out this morning, because we had that first lot at 2:30, it was very targeted to those areas where there may be risk to life. So it was to quite smaller groupings. That obviously over the course of the day has been expanded as we got to that third earthquake. The advice that we've received is that the warning system is adequate, but I also too want to make the note that all of the media have played a significant role today in informing and keeping people very abreast of what it is that they should be doing, and I need to acknowledge the important role you've all played. The NEMA system doesn't operate in isolation. It requires people to carry that information, of which this team here has been exceptional stewards of. So where we look to in terms of the real impacts on the ground, do people know what they're meant to be doing? By and large, the responses and the feedback that we're getting is yes. When we're looking to those areas that needed to evacuate, by and large, when we're on the phones and talking to those, it seems to be that people understand very clearly what they need to do. So if we look at it as a system whole, has today's exemplified that the system is working? It seems to be that's the case, but obviously we'll be doing ongoing reviews to ensure that that is in fact the case.
Could any of those sirens have gone off and didn't?
Perhaps I could make a comment on that, Minister. So the sirens are not operated nor activated by national authorities. Where sirens exist, they belong to and are operated by either local civil defence emergency management groups or possibly councils. So that is something for us to look at afterwards. But the operation of the sirens is not something that is handled by NEMA.
Do you have an idea or prediction about how extreme it could get, what sort of waves we might see?
Yeah, look, we'll turn to Bill in a second for that. And the indices that have come out in terms of the mapping that's been provided, in those lower lying areas, the predictions based on the science that they've provided is that under 1 metre that will get to that swell. But for the areas that we've been asked to evacuate, that's where we've got a window, if you will, of a surge that may be between 1 metre to 3 metres, which is why we've asked for that evacuation. But Bill, you might like to add something there.
Sure. We know from previous experience around the globe that time saves lives, so the quicker we can issue advice, the better prepared we are to make sure that people stay safe. So what we do in a response like this is we use the earliest available data to issue a forecast, and that forecast necessarily has a large range of uncertainty, and that's where that 1 to 3 meters comes in. As time progresses, as we're right now as we speak, we're collecting more and more data, we're updating our forecasts, and then the uncertainty of that model gets smaller. So as you just heard, right now the land threat is between a 1 and 3 meter threshold. We're not expecting them, but it's certainly possible. So as I said, when you get a big earthquake, you're more likely to have another big earthquake, but it's the unlikely scenario to have something bigger than the 8.1 we've just seen.
People who have evacuated and are waiting up on higher ground, you've asked them to stay there until we know that's ready to go. Do you have any idea around the time frame that they could be waiting, and what are we looking for in terms of, knowing that we've got the all clear to go?
Yeah.
To answer that first, no, we don't have particular timeframes. They could be quite long, could be quite lengthy, which is why we're asking people to really heavily rely on the broadcasting from media, on the messaging from civil defence. Bill and his team are working exceptionally hard to ensure that the science is robust, that we have mitigated the risk to life before we can enable people to go home. And so it may even be as lengthy as sometime this afternoon. Bill, you may want to add something further there.
Sure. As we do improve the models, you might expect some of those threat bands, the coastal threat bands, to change. So rather than being a point in time where we say all of New Zealand's coastlines are completely safe, return to your normal activities, you might see an alteration of that map where you see the areas that have the highest threat perhaps change levels, and the other threat bands change levels as well.
Could you please run through what happened sort of at 2:30 in the morning and sort of what the response was and what was activated and sort of go through what happened?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we're in the hands of Roger Ball at that point.
Sure. So 2:30 in the morning. I think one of the things to point out about that very first earthquake is that a lot of people felt it all around New Zealand, and that's normal. That's what we expect, and that's what we base our public education campaign on, which is the first warning is often what we call natural, the felt effect. Okay, so I got woken up, our duty team gets woken up. There is already a 24/7 awake capability, which is based on the Geohazards Monitoring Centre operated by GNS, and they are on it straight away. Our duty team assembles and we activate our National Crisis Management Centre here below the beehive. So it's a constant flow of trying to assess data and get public information out, and as the Minister indicated earlier on, it's a constant tension between speed and accuracy, because we want to get information out in a timely manner, but we also want to make sure that what we're saying is useful and doesn't lead to a yo-yo effect or having to unwind the information.
No, there's no people on the Kermadec right now, from what we understand, but do we have any idea of how bad the damage is to any of the kind of infrastructure that we do have there at this point?
Yeah, we haven't received any information to date that I'm aware of a damage assessment on the islands. Over the course, though, of the next period, once the emergency and any kind of emergent risks are contained, then we'll be able to undertake that risk assessment.
About 1,000 kilometres away, but the sea floor, it's essentially kind of a trench between there and here. Does that change the kind of wave modelling?
It does, in quite a complicated way, which I'll get you to explain. I couldn't explain it prior.
Yeah, it sure does. The waves we see hitting New Zealand are a function of the wave that was started where the earthquake was and the path it takes to get to our coastlines. So in this deep water of the trench, the waves move very, very quickly, and that means that those waves arriving in, say, East Cape are arriving before those in North Cape that take a slower path. So the seafloor absolutely makes an impact, and then as waves get into shallower and shallower shorelines, then they start to get taller and taller and slower and slower.
Minister, communities who are up on hill, have you had any advice around, food supplies, water supplies, getting out to those people given the time in which they need to wait there? Yeah,
absolutely. So I've been in touch with a number of the local civil defence teams to check on what types of supplies are being provided. My understanding is that there are multiple resources that have been stood up to service the communities, and that's something that we'll be, checking on throughout the course of the day, depending on the length of time that people are required to be up in those highlands.
When we have some reports of the Waitangi River and the Whangarei town basin emptying and the water that has remained there has changed colour, can you confirm that? And if it has done that, what does that mean?
You want to make a comment? Well, I'll make a first comment. We are still gathering that information and impact data as it is coming in, but perhaps Bill might have a general comment.
Yeah, I haven't heard any of that information, but we did flag the area, the coastal zone around Whangarei as one of the places early on that might be subject to some of our biggest waves in New Zealand. So it's not outside our expectations to see changes in the currents there and changes in the water behaviour.
Mr. Fry mentioned time saves lives. This morning, were lives at risk, and are lives still at risk?
Yeah, look, when those evacuation notices go out, that's when it is considered that there is a risk to life. So when you are asked to evacuate, that's at the forefront of our team's notifications to people. And you don't ask people to do that lightly. So you would have heard, for example, earlier this morning, there was a range of comments about some people getting notices and some not. The assessment was done based on that risk to life component. If you assessed as maybe it being a marine threat only, so where we could see that there was going to be some impact in the waters, but it wouldn't be so significant that it would cause risk to life, you probably didn't get the siren going off. But if you were within that area, it was a loud penetrating siren that got people up, and then obviously that caused people to move into action.
We're in the middle of a lockdown.
And just in terms of a message to Kiwis who are feeling really anxious, who are feeling really worried about this, what do you say to them?
Yeah, I think, look, that's absolutely natural to feel at the moment. The messaging that's been coming out all day is very likely to cause high levels of anxiety. What we're asking people is to try and stay calm, touch base with people that you love, check on the people that you know might be most at risk, and to really just listen to the advice that is coming through. There is very good messaging available to people. I know that within the communities that have been evacuated, there are hands-on-deck volunteers through to professionals that are there to assist, to be able to provide that kind of hands-on, guidance that may be required for some. So please do reach out. It's absolutely natural in these times to feel high degrees of anxiety, and there's plenty of people there that are able to be able to walk alongside you at the moment.
So given that Great Barrier is part of Auckland and they are under the level 3 restrictions at the moment, how should they balance it? You mentioned before that the civil defence overrides the COVID restrictions, so they should be listening to the civil defence instructions?
That's absolutely correct. So that's absolutely correct. In this circumstance, the civil defence messaging and instructions override the COVID ones for now.
So how does that work? So should they get to high ground, and if they can be 2 metres apart, they do that, but if not?
No. It's for now that is the civil defence response overrides. So get to the highland. That's the thing that we're asking people to do in these circumstances. That's the priority.
Just in terms of rural isolated coastal communities, some are taking high ground, which is still quite close to the coast. Is the advice to stay there or to move as far inland as possible?
Yeah, look, no, the advice is to get to highland, so the risk has been assessed for those areas that have been asked to evacuate. Between 1 to 3 metres is the expectation that wave may get to. So if they're at high points, that is sufficient. Also, some whānau are going inland, which is also appropriate as well. Did you want to add anything there?
I would just add that going up or going inland, both options are valid, and it depends. What we recommend is to check your local tsunami evacuation plan arrangements. And if it's possible to do that at this point, that is the information that we would like people to follow. But they've done the right thing. They've made themselves safe, and that's exactly the reaction that we wanted to get.
Also, in those communities, I will say, Whati, is that you've got like exceptional stewards like Te Araroa, the firefighters, it's everybody's nannies, uncles, koros are in those trucks telling everybody to get up high, putting them where they know that they should be. You've got people like Ngāti Piro Radio that are on the lines to everybody. Those channels in those particularly rural communities are really interlinked, which is helpful in these times of stress. When that alarm went at 2:29 this morning, those communities were the first to up and mobilise, and they knew exactly what to do, so that's pretty heartening from our perspective.
And videos are just coming out of Tukumaru Bay of first wave. Is this something that you have planned for?
Well, first of all, I would ask that hopefully people aren't getting too close to be able to see that wave, so please do head to the highlands or head inland. We don't want to see anybody at risk of life, but look, that is consistent with what we expect to see over the course of the day, that there will be these surges, and they will move in momentum over time. Bill, you may want to add to that, but that'll be the course of today. Jenna.
Some people who received the cancellation of the warning but not the actual warning itself. What went wrong there?
Are you referring to the emergency mobile alert? Okay, so we'll have a look afterwards to see if there was anything there in the technical transmission that we can improve on, but there could be a couple of reasons why that would happen. If people are on the fringes of reception and came in and out of that, I don't know. And those messages are punched out through cell phone towers. Sometimes they are on the boundaries on the edges of boundaries that, as we've defined them for evacuation. So there's a couple of things there to look at. We do make best efforts to get those out to the areas where people need to evacuate, so life safety, not to the areas where it's a lower level of risk.
Team, as you can appreciate, just that there are a lot of moving pieces at the moment, and we will need to move swiftly. So maybe if there's just the last couple of questions.
Will you update us again in a media conference, and also are you planning on heading out to some of those regions today or tomorrow? Or?
Yeah, well, as you'll know, Jess, it's home, so I want to get home as soon as I can. My bubba's up there and they're all been evacuated. But look, right now we are going to be in, I guess, shoulder to shoulder around that operational table for the course of the next day until we can see that there's been some real movement in those levels. When it's appropriate for me to get home, I'll definitely be doing that and meeting up with folks on the ground. In terms of our next media briefing, it will really depend on what happens over the course of the day, I'd say. The Prime Minister obviously as well has a stand up at 4 o'clock, so we'll work with you to notify. Oh, they're okay. They're all together, they're all together, and that's kind of the state of play for a lot of our families in the regions at the moment. It was a bit of a shock. Trying to work out what to do, but very swiftly people pulled themselves together, got their backpacks, got into the cars and have by and large congregated either inland or up high, and now watching it all unfold. So really grateful that people are following the safety advice.
Let's ask a couple of questions of Mr. Fry. What activity have you seen so far at the coastline? What should Kiwis look at? What should we be expecting? And does the activity in the Kermadec, will that lead to seismic activity actually centred on land in New Zealand?
So the first question, what should the coastal communities be looking out for? I think I would refer to what the CDEM groups tell them to do, so what the advice is. So hopefully they're not standing at the coast watching the waves. Hopefully they're in a safe place. What we expect scientifically through the course of the day, we expect a series of waves to come in. Some of the local harbors might even have energy. They might even have waves sloshing around from the earlier earthquakes today. When you get the waves from this 8.1 most recent earthquake superimposed on that, you can get a lot of wave energy bouncing around. So for some time, especially harbors that we know are susceptible to this sort of effect, they're going to be fluctuating for quite a few hours through the day. Your second question was the likelihood of triggering earthquakes in New Zealand. That's relatively small. So there is always a potential to trigger an earthquake, like we've seen today with these 3 earthquakes. But the likelihood of that happening is relatively minor compared to our overall hazard in New Zealand.
Okay, thank you, team. I will wrap it up now. Cheers.